welcome in. Let me tweet this out to everybody so we can discuss this as we are talking right now after the Rockets 125-124 double overtime loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder in the 2025-26 regular season debut. I'm here with Ben DuBose. Ben, I got to tell you, I feel like I logged 15 to 20 minutes myself in this game. Like my heart was up and down. It just was like one of those games where it was back and forth. It was thrilling drama. It was, for me, it was an advertisement for the NBA, but it's so painful to come out on the losing end in this game when there were so many opportunities. And there's a lot of positive things to talk about, and we're going to definitely dive into those things. But just, I got to get your initial thoughts just on the loss and just, overall what they had a chance there in double overtime.
It's frustrating because the game was right there to be won multiple times and you just couldn't get over the finish line. And first things first, I hope Amen Thompson is okay.
Absolutely.
If it's any more than cramps, that would be a devastating loss because I think he was a dynamic player tonight. He looked clearly better than a year ago in terms of generating his own offense off the dribble, what he did late in regulation. And really, I think the second half and the fourth quarter in particular had the most telling possessions. I don't think overtime or double overtime was that telling because both teams were so gassed. It was just a matter of who would outlast the other. And unfortunately, when both teams are gassed, it often comes down to who can get the cheapies at the free throw line. And we all know SGA is better than anybody at that. And so it's sort of fitting that that's how it ended. But no, I mean, the one thing I'll say, it was a great performance. I mean, in the macro, you take the defending champs to double overtime at their place. There's nothing to really complain about in the big picture. You looked like you belonged. And in terms of some of the offensive issues, the turnovers, it's one of the best defenses you'll play all year, probably the best ball pressure you'll play all year. But what was most frustrating about it, we spent the entire offseason talking about Kevin Durant as the closer, and this game, he had multiple opportunities to close it out and couldn't. The missed free throw in the last 10 seconds of regulation, the turnover early in overtime that sort of put them behind the 8 ball. I know they fought back, but, well, it wasn't just the turnover. It was also the missed box out against Case and Wallace, which led to the Chet Holmgren 3.
And nearly lost the game with the I'm sorry if that's what you're going to say. The time.
Yeah, the foul at the end of double overtime.
Yeah.
So in the final seconds of regulation and in both of the overtimes, there were plays by KD that were there to be made and weren't. And, my suspicion is that a lot of it had to do with it being mid-October and the legs just aren't quite there. I thought that was true of a lot of guys. The one guy that was best for the Rockets was clearly Alperen Sengun, and I think that's because of Eurobasket. He was in by far the best shape. And so when you're going up against a defense that good, and then the game turns from 48 minutes to 53 and 53 to 58, Sengun was the one guy who was best positioned to sort of play through it physically and mentally. I didn't even mention the timeout that KD called at the end of the first overtime when the Rockets didn't have any and just got bailed out by the fact that the officials didn't see him and thus didn't grant it. It's one game out of 82. There's no reason to be despondent. My guess is that, he's 37 years old. It's the middle of October. He had off-season hand surgery. So there's a lot of reasons to think that, his body, his mind isn't all the way there yet. But it is disappointing that, you spend the last 3 months talking about you've got the closer and you have at least 3 different opportunities to close out that game. And not only do you not close it out, you don't close it out in part because of, lapses that he has. Or I don't know if the missed free throw was a lapse, but it was an opportunity.
Yeah. And I think it's, it is one game. We'll see how it goes. I think there was an issue with the Rockets getting him the ball too. It's a problem. And, obviously not having the table setter, with Fred out, that's going to be an issue this year. And I think we can definitely talk a lot about KD. KD in the first half was much better than he was in the second half. And obviously the overtime periods.
And see, I think some of what happened in the second half was KD wasn't moving quite as much away from the ball. Like, there's going to be a lot of talk. It feels like the go-to, at least in the national media, every time anything goes wrong for the Rockets this season, it's going to be, they don't have Fred VanVleet, which is sort of funny because they had a lot of these same issues last year with Fred VanVleet. Now, I know they didn't have Kevin Durant last year, but let's not act like this was just a lockdown team that made all the plays late in close games. No, it was ugly last year. And I think one of the differences, like people are going to point out, and rightfully so, there was a graphic I forget if it was the first or second overtime, but it said KD had 13 shots in the first 3 quarters, and he had like 1 shot in, I think, the first quarter and maybe the first overtime. And that looks bad, and I'm sure there's some things you can do to get him the ball more proactively.
Yeah.
But I also think he just wasn't moving as much. Like some of the mistakes he had, the middle lapse with the timeout, physically missing the free throw when last year he was 94% in the clutch, 88% overall. The foul against SGA when he was undisciplined and left his feet before he needed to. Like, there's a lot of things that point to fatigue being a factor in this game. We know he had the hand surgery in the offseason, well, thumb surgery, but you're right that they have to be able to get him the ball more frequently, and his lack of shot attempts are an issue. I just think some of it probably comes down to KD's conditioning as well, and it's game 1 of 82. It's not realistic to expect him to be in, MVP level form for 82 games, but I just don't think it's as simple as saying the Rockets don't have a point guard. No, I think there were many possessions where they were trying to, and KD just wasn't able to get to the spot.
And I want to, the KD issue is definitely a big part of this game. I want to get to, I think, what was the most positive, most impressive thing, and that was Sengun. Sengun finished with 39 points, 11 boards, 7 assists. But I still think the most impressive thing about Sengun is he's hitting threes. I think you nailed the other thing, that he's in the best shape of his life. And I think that's been the case now. This is the 3rd straight summer, I think, where he's gotten, he didn't have a good first summer. And then now it's 3 in a row that he's really done well. He's in great condition and he's hitting threes. And even if he had made, 2 for 8 tonight, he made 5 for 8, by the way. If he had made 2 for 8, it's such a noticeable change in that he's comfortable shooting it. And I think, to me, I think that's what's just jumping off the page. It is such a significant leap. To me, we had some clips. I didn't get all the ones from overtime, obviously, because we wanted to go live, but, just looking at some of the things that he did today, shooting threes and if I can play this clip here, is he was just so comfortable shooting it. And go ahead.
How far back he shot that 3. He's not at the line. He's at 26, 27 feet there. So many of these threes. Here's another one. He's a good 2 steps behind the line.
And that's his 5th there. And this is what's interesting. Watch Chet now have to go out and respect it. That's what's fascinating. He bites on the fake. And then this is that beautiful move that Sengun made where he pulls up, draws the foul, hits the 18-footer. I got to tell you, that is such a significant thing. It's one of the biggest problems I've had with Sengun, or just any center like Sengun, is that shooting is an issue. And, even last year, I thought really anything outside of, say, 5-8 feet was an issue for him. And he's comfortable shooting threes. Like, that is such a significant deal. If they do add a point guard, having Sengun as a stretch big and being passable on defense is a game changer, in my opinion. Just watching these defenders have to go out there. And I will say, just to amend Thompson, he was 0 for 7 from 3 tonight. But just the fact that he's comfortable taking these, I know people will laugh like he didn't make a single one, but it's a significant change as well. Sengun didn't take more than 3 3-pointers in a game last year, like at all. He took 8, had attempted, I believe, 5 by halftime. So anyway, I just, if there's one huge positive that I take from this game, and there were several, to me, it's Sengun is showing legitimate range. He was the best 3-point shooter on the team tonight.
By far, without Sengun, they were 6 of 33. And that's one of the big positives for me, is that, the Thunder, people will chalk this up to, this was a winnable game for Houston because OKC shot unsustainably poorly from 3. Well, so did the Rockets. The Thunder were 13 of 52. The Rockets were 11 of 39, and they were 11 of 39. That difference is 28% for the Rockets to 25% for the Thunder. So basically parity. And the Rockets shot 28% with Sengun making 5 of 8. Without Sengun, they were 6 of 33, below 20%. Whatever you think of their shooting, they are not that bad. I'm sorry, they're not. And, Kevin was 0 of 4, and Reed Shepherd was 2 of 7. These are good shooters. Tari Eason was 1 of 4. Like, they can make these shots. It's not all, with Amen Thompson. Now, the 0 of 7, he did have the 1 above the break 3 in the first half that was eventually ruled a 2, but it was definitely 3-point range from anywhere else on the floor. I'm hopeful that some of Amen's struggles were because of, it's been reported that he was having issues with that calf and the cramping from really the start of the second half. So maybe that affected his, he just didn't have enough in his legs to feel comfortable with those shots. I hope that's the case. From the eye test, it feels like a lot of them were short. But the Rockets shooting poorly from three. It's not just, the Thunder left him in Thompson. He's a bad shooter. No, the Rockets had a lot of good shots that they could have made and just didn't. And I guess that's the one silver lining for me is that, the Thunder, they missed some shots. You can't accurately say that they'll shoot better than 25% in most games. I also think the Rockets will shoot better than 28% in most games, even with, Sengun doing what he did today. The overall performance could still be better.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of that. One thing I want to point out is the Rockets dominated the glass, as they always do with that big lineup. They dominated the glass tonight, but the turnovers were significantly different, especially the Rockets didn't force many in that second half. I think the Rockets had 21 today and the Thunder had 11. So the Thunder actually took more shots, more field goal attempts, which is a rare thing against the Rockets because the Rockets dominate the glass so much. I don't want to use the Fred excuse, but if you do lower the turnovers, it could be a little bit of a different story. We're missing Fred. They're missing Jalen Williams, potato, all that stuff. But it's notable that the turnovers were an issue tonight, and not so much in the first quarter, but definitely in the later half. Steven Adams played 36 plus minutes tonight. I mean, that's got to be a Rocket career high for him. That's definitely notable. And on Sengun as well, almost 49 minutes to your point about conditioning tonight. And we could go on and on about Sengun. He played really well, hit some big shots. But I don't think he's alone in like the improvement. I think Jabari has made huge leaps, and I think I want to say huge, but definitely big progress. And I think Amen as well. The unfortunate part, as you pointed out, for those who don't know, Amen in maybe overtime. I think the first overtime period.
I think it was the end of regulation that he left with the cramps in his right calf.
Okay, maybe it was end of regulation. And it was funny, the OKC fans booed because he was on the floor and they couldn't keep playing, which I was like, okay, we have a little Seattle Mariners situation here. But he didn't come back into the game, and he obviously had cramped. I thought his defense, he had, first of all, several plays in this game where you're like, wow, like this guy has it. He's going to be really, really good. And his defense on SGA to hold him, I think, to 2 of 5 shooting in the first half. That was the big deal. Chet Holmgren had his way in the first half. He hit his first 7 shots. And I thought he actually did a good job defending Sengun, because I thought they came out of the game with Holmgren on Sengun. I'm like, oh, Sengun's going to eat him up. Didn't really happen, actually. Chet did a pretty good job on him. And, of course, on the other end was really feasting. It was the second half and the overtime periods where Sengun really took off. But anyway, my point is, Amen really did an excellent job, I thought, on SGA until, the free throws down the stretch really kind of hurt the Rockets.
And I thought the 2 or 3 bully ball drives that Amen had in the fourth quarter of that game when it was winning time were some of the most impressive plays I've seen from him. Like, he's had glimpses of that his first 2 years, but it was generally in non-high leverage situations, like, late in the third, early in the fourth, late in the first, early in the second quarters, going up against second teamers and backups. Do that against a really good defense with everything on the line. He drew a comparison from the NBC crew to Penny Hardaway in one of those spin moves. Like, that's special. And so it sucks that he didn't get an opportunity to close the game, because, quite frankly, outside of Alperen Sengun, he was clearly your best player tonight. He was the guy that they were riding, I think, in part because, it's always a little bit tougher to have a big man initiate your offense at the very end of a fourth quarter and overtime. We've talked about that. It's the theme throughout NBA history. So it feels like that's why when it got to 4-3, 2 minutes in the fourth quarter, they were doing a little bit more through him in, and he was feasting. And that's why it's a shame that, that he wasn't able to finish. Now, I will say, kudos to Josh Okogie, who I thought played really well and, gave them a chance even with when Amen wasn't out there.
Seemed to leapfrog Tari at one point. I mean, it seemed like Tari in crunch time was on the bench for Okogie. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, Tari had the key block at the end of overtime. Yeah. Sorry, but he that was, I think, the first time he came in for some stretch. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Go ahead, Okogie kept them afloat, but obviously he's not going to do offensively what Amen does. And so that's the real shame, is that not only is it a painful loss, but it really felt like, hey, this is a game where Amen can get you to the finish line, because the Rockets had them at, certainly not a commanding lead, but at arm's length for a lot of the second half. The Rockets led by as many as 10 or 12, and felt like for most of the fourth quarter, they were up by, 2, 4, 6 points. It sort of oscillated, but they had a little bit of an advantage, and it felt like, hey, like, keep it close enough, have a little bit of a lead, and then Amen Thompson can make just a couple of late plays. And unfortunately, with the calf, he didn't get the chance to. And, I'll be clear, he was trying to get back in the game. He was at the scorer's table, if you noticed, for a couple of possessions, but there was sort of this fight, and I'm sure the Rockets made the right call because it's game 1 of 82. There's not a huge gulf between, cramps and a strain that can, linger
Sure.
for some time. Obviously, a calf is tricky on so many levels, so they were probably right to err on the side of caution, no matter how painful this is. But yeah, that's one of the shames. Like, it felt like Amen, especially in the fourth quarter with those plays he was making one-on-one. Because honestly, like, that's the question. This is a guy who in his first 2 years was already an all defensive first team guy. So you're
Yeah.
exactly right that his defense on SGA was great, but to some extent we already expect that. What he was
Yep.
doing offensively as a creator, I thought was pretty special. And one of many things that stings about this game is that he didn't get the chance to close it.
Yeah, absolutely. Men finished, let's see, 18 points. He was a minus 11, which was notable. Just, sometimes the plus minus can tell lies in a single game, but still that stuck out. He was 0 for 7, but he was 8 for 10 inside the arc, which was notable. Jabari was 7 of 15 for 16 points, 5 boards, hit a big shot in double overtime. They went to Jabari in the post one time down low.
Yep.
For a turnaround jumper. I was like, wow, this is real progress. Like, we're doing different things now, and we're using some of these players in different ways. So, give all the credit to Sengun tonight. Was awesome. I thought Jabari played well. I thought Amen before he went out. KD, obviously mixed bag, but strong offensively early on. Look, there's a lot of positive, but I got to talk about something negative because this is somebody we've been considering starting, and that was Reed Shepherd. Just the on-ball defense in the first half.
Yeah.
And I apologize for those who don't like to see some some negative things, but he got cooked like 4 or 5 times in the first half. That like the kind of things that when you get cooked like that, it's notable once. He's going to be hunted a lot this year. He's a great shooter. He's going to give you a lot of offense, and I think you got to play through it as much as you want to contend this year, and you can contend this year with some tweaks. You're going to have to play through it because he is a really good prospect, and we know what he can do offensively. But the on-ball defense in these kind of big-time situations is a problem. He will be hunted. It's just a thing.
And he shot just 3 of 11, 2 of 7 from 3. I saw Nathan Fogg say tonight over on Blue Sky that, the defense at this point in his career is going to be a liability. He just has to shoot his way through it. And he tried to, and the shots just didn't go in. And so that's what's really frustrating about this one is that, he did do some good things. This wasn't like year one where he got timid. He kept pushing the issue. And I thought, especially in the 2 overtime periods, he was the one guy that had a little bit of juice. He just wasn't able to make the shots, even at the free throw line. We talked about the Kevin miss in the last 10 seconds of regulation, but both Reed and Sengun, and I'll give Sengun a pass because obviously he was like 8 of 9, 9 of 10, really good from the line overall. But the Reed Shepherd miss in the first overtime, which ended up tied, I mean, that was meaningful. And so, you're not going to draw any firm conclusions after one game against a really good defense. But for me, the biggest area that I misread was that it felt like, and maybe this will change against a defense that's not Oklahoma City. We have to keep saying that. But it just felt like the fifth wheel, you were damned if you do, damned if you don't. With Steven, you're going to be just massive on the offensive glass, and you're going to have screen setting opportunities, but you're going to be not that mobile, and the spacing is going to be a little bit clunky. I don't care how smart you are. If you don't have to guard the guy beyond 5 feet from the rim, there are going to be some limitations. And, we talked at halftime. It was funny. We had this exchange during halftime about, is Sengun going to be able to get going without Fred VanVleet? And he did because he made threes, which is something you wouldn't necessarily count on. Thankfully, it worked tonight. Hopefully, it continues. We talked about that earlier. But I think part of the problem is when the floor is compressed with Steven, you always give up something a little bit. Now you can go to Reed, but there's the defensive trade-off, and he wasn't good enough tonight offensively to overcome that. And you're a little bit small on both ends. And Tari was just bad, period. Like, I just thought, Tari is a guy who thrives off of playing in chaos, and this was a fairly half-court game. There wasn't a ton of transition opportunities, and I just don't think he's quite skilled enough at this point in time. And maybe he can knock off the rust because obviously he's not played a ton the last couple of years, and it's early in the season. But it just felt like whenever he shot at an angle, whenever he was off balance, he wasn't able to finish. It just feels like with Tari, the skill wasn't there. And then he missed his shots as well. Like when he had open threes, he wasn't even close.
Yeah.
So it just sort of felt like no matter what you did, and to Josh Okogie's credit, he did everything he possibly could. I see someone in the comments saying DFS will put us over the top, fifth starter. I hope so. Like
that's one thing. You got to wait for him to come back.
Yeah, because it felt like tonight, whatever you did, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Steven, Reed, Tari, they all have certain skills, but they also have clear weaknesses, and especially against a really good team like that, obviously your weaknesses are going to get exposed, and it just felt like there was a big drop off from the main four to whoever that fifth guy was.
Yeah, and I just want to note, I'm glad you mentioned Sengun's free throw shooting because I forgot to. I think that's a very important thing too. It's not just the threes, but the free throws. He wasn't like, amazing inside the arc, and I can't remember. At least maybe he picked it up in overtime, but like what he's doing now with his shot is anyway so significant.
And the free throws would offer hope that the 3-point shooting bump is more sustainable. Like there's a lot of guys, especially in a small sample, they'll hit threes, but if the free throw shooting is about the same, then it's due to regress. If he's having a bump both in threes and free throws, then that offers hope that it's a more sustainable improvement.
Yeah. In what you're kind of talking about as far as this, we'll see how this plays out. The balance between Adams, Reed, the balance between DFS when he gets back. But you can see enough potential here. I really look at 4. I think we talk about big 3, but I'm including Jabari now in there. I think that you've got 4 guys that I think are, 3 of them are quite young, but you've got KD here. You've got a real opportunity. I think that they're going to, again, something could change, but I think they'll pursue a point guard down the line, like whether it's a Giroux or somebody like that can help settle them down. I think Bima Thug made a good point tonight. And it's just an opinion. You may not necessarily agree with it, but he said, I think you'll see other teams, pressing and putting on more ball pressure up at the half court line, because that's becoming a new trend as well. And we didn't see it as much tonight. And is that going to be a weakness of the Rockets that can be exposed down the line? And that's where I just think maybe you might see something happen. The Fred injury is just so unfortunate, but still, this is a very talented team. We're going to see, I think, quite a few wins here coming up. Rockets are going to play I believe the Pistons Friday is the next game.
Yeah.
But man, I'm not even kidding. I literally was like short of breath watching this game. I'm like, this is just so intense. It like the NBA delivers. Like that's how I felt tonight. It was a great game. It sucks to come out the wrong end of this, but it was intense. And I really, really thought it was brutal to lose on the 2 free throws by SGA. Like, the whole, yes, it was a foul. He baited KD jumped and he fouled him. But just to lose like
just
that.
Just a tough way to lose on that for the game to be decided. I mean,
only thing worse would have been losing on a timeout calling, that you didn't actually have. That's the only thing I could think of.
You can't not call it. But in some ways, I think the timeout that wasn't granted, it's not just physical fatigue, it's mental as well. And it just felt like whoever was going to win this game, and what people overlook with these two teams, and this was a heavyweight fight, as you alluded to, and this wasn't any normal 48 minutes. This was a really hard-fought 48 minutes. So in the middle of October, there were a lot of guys whose tanks were on empty late in the fourth quarter. And so that's why I think, frustrating as it is, it does make sense when you think about it that, the 2 overtimes were sort of decided by, mental and physical lapses late. It's mid-October, and especially if you're 37 years old, I mean, not to be making excuses, but it's just the reality. It's it's an 82 game grind, and Kevin can, and I think he will be better than, and that's not to say that the game is his fault, not at all. Like, he was still very good overall. I thought in the first half he was incredible. He was a big part of how the Rockets were playing with a lead. So all in all, I think they're going to be fine. Like, there's more good than bad out of this performance. Just it stings because this would have been a big time statement win that you could plant your flag on the road against the defending champs. It was right there and you couldn't get over the finish line. And there's multiple reasons for that. It's just, a little bit of a bummer.
And I think anybody who watched the game, you're right. People who just check the box score aren't paying attention and thinking, well, okay, Rockets lost, OKC won. That's what we expected. But if you did watch the game, you know the Rockets look like they've got some real potential here. So I think that's great. I think the best joke I heard tonight was, third quarter, somebody saying Tari Eason should have signed his extension, because he just didn't really play very well. And I'm hoping this is just a fluke. You just like we did in the first preseason game, we take one game and we just extrapolate it out and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. Things are going to change from here to there, but you can definitely see the trends. The rebounding is there. If they can control the turnovers, the defense is there. I do think OKC missed a lot of open threes. You addressed this earlier. Rockets as well did miss threes. So that could be an issue, but the rebounding dominance is still there. The defense is still strong.
That was encouraging. We talked in the preseason about would the identity change? No, when it mattered and they had to, grind it out, they were able to defensively. I thought that was encouraging that even against obviously a very strong offensive team. I know the Thunder didn't have Jalen Williams, but, SGA and Chet shooting out of his mind, there's plenty of firepower. And so that was one of the positives as well, is that when it mattered, it did, I don't want to say they were exactly what they were a year ago, but they were still pretty good defensively, much better in the preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of anything else, like I said, that we didn't necessarily touch on. I really thought Amen shined in the first quarter. It's unfortunate they lost him when they did, as you pointed out. Hopefully he's fine and good to go. He's going to be playing his brother on Friday, I believe. And
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, and go ahead.
No, I just think what really stood out, Amen's absence and the two overtimes and down the stretch of that game. I talked about missing a fifth starter, and hopefully Dorian Finney-Smith can fill that void. That's where I think the Rockets, as I said, miss Fred the most. It's not just his point guard skills. It's that whatever your other options are, you go big, you go small, you go versatile. There are pluses and minuses to all of those configurations, and a team like OKC will find the minuses and hunt those. And so hopefully it looks better with DFS, but without Amen, you're basically just three qualified starters in KD, Sengun, and Jabari. And so that's a lot. That's something we also need to keep in mind as we sort of contextualize this game, is that beyond the fatigue, which I do think played a role, look, the Rockets had 3/5 of the starting lineup they would like to have in the two overtimes of this game. And that's tough.
Yeah, that was the unfortunate part too in overtime, where obviously you balanced it with different lineups, but they had to go to Reed because they lost a point guard. They needed somebody with some ball handling ability, and the defense. Everybody had tired legs by that point, as you pointed out earlier. But there were a couple of defensive issues there with Reed that you just you kind of have to live with. He is a really good prospect. I'm not knocking him. It's just he's not cooked yet. He's not fully baked, and he's being thrown out there a little.
Well, he was cooked tonight, but for the wrong reason.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. But he's just he basically needed that extra year, I think, for Fred to be here and him to still get his minutes and play.
But not his high leverage.
Yeah, he's thrust into the situation with Sengun, Amen, Jabari having taken leaps. At least it appears that way. They've all progressed significantly. And KD, who's 37 and Hall of Famer, two-time champion, previous MVP winner, they're ready to win now. So there is that gap, which is a little bit unfortunate. But he's thrown into the fire, man. He's going to be put into situations where we're just going to have to live, as you pointed out, with the defense.
And I'm sure if an OKC fan was listening to this, they'd point out that, hey, not only did they not have Jalen Williams, but they also lost Holmgren and Hartenstein in the two overtimes for fouling out. Well, what I would say is that for the way this Rockets team is built, without Fred and then losing Amen Thompson, really the Rockets had trouble exploiting the lack of size near the rim, because as long as the Thunder had their guys like Caruso and Cason Wallace and Dort that could, exert the ball pressure on the perimeter or play KD really hard away from the ball, then it was tough for the Rockets to get near the rim to where their theoretical size advantage could convert over an OKC team that didn't have Chet and Hardy. Like, that was the issue for me, is that, the Rockets theoretically got some breaks when they fouled out those big men, but without the point guard, it's tougher to take advantage of those. And, it's not beyond the Thunder being really good, which is, something we have to keep mentioning. The Rockets also didn't have Amen Thompson. And so I'm hoping that, this is a game that if the Rockets get more opportunities in the near future, that if Amen's able to stay out there, the late game execution looks a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunate outcome. Ben, I appreciate you doing this. You know, it's basically Rockets fall short by 1 point, 125, 124 in double overtime. They'll play again on Friday against the Pistons. I think the Rockets look really strong. There's a lot of positive things, a lot of promising things. Ben and I will be back tomorrow. We're going to do a show with Rockets employee who shall still remain nameless, I believe.
No, Gretchen Shearer, president of business operations. We can say it now.
Okay, awesome. We're going to talk all things about the Rockets, you know, things going on behind the scenes and things of that nature. So it's going to be fun. We're looking forward to that. And so we will see you guys tomorrow. Appreciate everybody. We've been overwhelming support tonight. Everybody showing up. It was a hell of a game. I'm sure you guys all lived it just like we did.
And died with it.
Yeah. Exactly. So thank you all for hanging out. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, get notifications when we go live, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.